It is 24 again with another video. Remember to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe for more. And I'm going to bring two videos today. One is going to be about the best games of the year and the potential running for those. And the other one is going to be about the worst games of the year. And it's going to be a fun day today. Let's get started. So on my first, and this is going to be in an order from worst to best games on the list. I shouldn't say worst. I would say that the lowest numbers are going to be pretty good, almost great games. And on the bottom of the list, like 0, 1, or not 0, 1, like 1, 0, -1, those are going to be probably the best games on the list for you to go buy. The first game on the list is Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, or whatever it's called. It was released on Xbox One last December, I think. It came out, in April of this year, or I think it came out in January for PC, and it's delayed, and it wasn't delayed, it was just, it was delayed. I think that's the best way to describe it. This game, just describing describing the actual release date is kind of why it's put so far back on this list. And in all honesty, in that release date crap, a lot of the actual games magic that had come with the first Tomb Raider was lost because you had Square Enix kind of pandering to Microsoft, having the PC release be delayed and then the PS4 release being delayed. It was just a clusterfuck that shouldn't have happened. But the game itself is good enough to really recover from the release date problems. Next up is BioShock, the Collector's Edition. I do put on remakes and remasters on these lists, but they won't have the potential to be Game of the Year because really and truly they probably already got Game of the Year to some degree, or they got enough recognition. I'm going to put the BioShock Collector's Edition at number 10. Tomb Raider was my number 11 because BioShock, the Collector's Edition, has all of the DLC of all of the BioShock games. It had even the prequel for BioShock. I forgot the game's title, but it had the DLC for that game, which was pretty interesting because you see that in a lot of remakes, but for BioShock, the DLC that was in the remake was actually really good. And I think that most of these games that are released now or that are further up on this list actually beat BioShock, not by much, but by just enough to really put it over the edge. Plus, unlike the Skyrim remaster, which is the next game, this game, BioShock, or the BioShock Collector's Edition, it got the graphics right perfectly. Instead of it being a downgrade of graphics, so to speak, because Skyrim, technically it was a large world and it was beautiful, but whenever they tried to upgrade the graphics, it made it look pretty shoddy, I would say. And obviously, this is going to be the next game, the Skyrim, the remastered or collector's edition, whatever it's called. Simply put, the graphics make the game look pretty bad, but the overall gameplay is still there. Plus, again, you get DLC, which for Skyrim, it just adds on hundreds of hours of gameplay for Skyrim, and it was pretty good and fun to replay parts of Skyrim again, because it's been maybe 4 or 5 years since I've really played Skyrim, and it was good to go back and play some of that. But really, I think the PlayStation 3 version is better than the PS4 and the Xbox One versions because it looks better. So Bethesda kind of screwed up on that. Next up is going to be Battlefield 1. Never thought I would say this about an EA game. It it looked okay. I thought this was just gonna be another annual release of a not a Bioshock game, but of a Battlefield game. It looked like it looks, excuse me, amazing. The gameplay, I didn't know how they would do trench warfare in in Battlefield One, because if you aren't aware of trench warfare, you pretty much dig a hole or dig rows of holes, or you dig into the surface. You dig lines into the surface, and you put men in those lines, and it's pretty much like having a fort, except it's underground. And in World War One, there was the captain or the commander of of certain platoons or squads. He would blow his whistle. He would send his men over the trench. They would get killed because the other side had machine guns. They would mow people down. The other side would do that, and it just wasn't a good tactic. I'm glad that they put in mustard gas, which was in the game. They did have trenches in the game, but it was the setting of Battlefield One was kind of towards the end of the war, where they had trench warfare, or the capability to combat trenches, I would say. So it was a good game to me. Doom is going to be my next game. I've lost track of the numbers because I've had to already just mess up I had to reorganize some of the games on the list. Doom is going to be the next game. After Rage, I think that came out, may have been 2010, 2011. After Rage came out, it seemed like the company that had made Doom had kind of just lost its way. Because Rage, don't get me wrong, it had good parts to it. It just didn't focus on those parts enough for it to really propel itself into from average into good and even great. And there were some pretty great concepts in Rage. And Doom kind of goes back to its roots. There's very little story to it. I actually I love the brutality in the game, but it goes back to its roots. It's very brutal. You're killing demons, and it's so there's no way to explain how good Doom is unless you've actually played it or you've seen gameplay of it. Like you, it's so much fun. And usually I don't I don't like to put games that have really great gameplay and very lackluster story in a game, not in a game of review, because it's like one of my first videos of it on this. But I don't like to credit games that only have gameplay and lack a story, because usually they kind of aren't. They don't have a lot of depth to them. But Doom definitely does, with its weapon customization and its actual dungeons. They're pretty detailed and well designed, and the actual map that you can activate and that you have, it's a 3D model, and it also has a 2D model, so you can look at all of these various levels of the map that you're on, and it's awesome. Ratchet and Clank is next. Ratchet and Clank is one of one of PlayStation's best ongoing series. I would say that maybe besides God of War and Uncharted, which I think just ended this year, I think Ratchet and Clank is probably top 3, top 5 PlayStation and Sony franchises, or series, excuse me, that really hasn't seen a game, excuse me, in maybe 4 or 5 years. I think there was a game that was released for the PlayStation 3. But this kind of retells the origin story of Ratchet and Clank, and I didn't expect to like the game as much as I did because of the movie. The movie was pretty mediocre, maybe even below mediocre. In fact, it had parts of the game in the movie. So seeing that as like the first introduction to the game, it was pretty depressing. But actually playing the game, uh, they got it right. I shouldn't say they finally, but they did get a lot of what they wanted to do with the Ratchet and Clank game. Uh, right, the replayability is through the roof, which is why a lot of people loved that game. And it's such a it's such a good feeling to see old characters come back to life in a new retelling of their old, not of their old, but of their origin stories, and I like that. Dark Souls 3 is the next game. Enough said about Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls, I don't hate it. I don't necessarily love it. The reason why it's on this, why it's on the running of, or the Game of the Year running, is because a lot of people love Dark Souls. I can see it as a very good game, and even a great game. It's just, it's so goddamn hard, and I hate losing. I hate losing so much, and that game, oh my god, that game makes me a loser. It's depressing to play Dark Souls 3, which is why it's probably such a good game, and it's why it's on this list. It may not necessarily be for me, but it may be for one of you that's watching this game. So the next game is going to be, and we're getting down to the list, there's maybe 4 games left, 4 or 5, is XCOM 2. It's a little bit weird to talk about XCOM 2 because XCOM 2 came out in February 5th, and it just released on the consoles September 13th. It came out February 5th on PC and September 13th on the consoles. Unlike the consoles, unlike Tomb Raider, it wasn't such an obvious marketing ploy, and it's not necessarily like Firaxis just took money from Microsoft or from Apple or whoever you want to say owns PC. It's Microsoft, but they made it on PC first because they thought that they wouldn't make any money off of it. Calling bullshit on that. And it's because they believed that on the PC that's where their strengths were. I can understand that, but it's it's screwing people who bought your first game over. And I hated that, which is why this game is kind of a little bit further up on the list. The actual gameplay is still pretty similar to what it was in the first game, XCOM Enemy Unknown and Enemy Within, except it's very revamped. A lot of things that needed to be touched on. The game is streamlined with the base system or your ship system, but it's good enough for me to really say to myself, well, damn, if these couple of games hadn't have been put on this list, or if they weren't released this year, this would probably be the game of the year. Unfortunately, they were, and unfortunately, it's like 4th or 5th. Next up is Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley, no, it's not Stardew Valley. It's The Witcher 3 Game of the Year edition. The Witcher 3 is probably the best game to be released in the last couple of years. I think that there is a legit argument that it could be better than The Last of Us, but this game, I'll just link the video that I made on The Witcher 3 in the description and somewhere around here, but pretty much The Witcher 3 was a really good game. Let's just leave it at that. And the DLC that came with it was as good as the source material and as the main game, and it just made the replayability just skyrocket through the game, skyrocket through the roof. That's all I'll say about The Witcher 3. I've said enough on it. Now it's Stardew Valley. And the reason why I do think The Witcher 3 is better than Stardew Valley and the other 3 games that are on this list, but I can't necessarily say that The Witcher 3 should earn Game of the Year twice, even though it was released last year and even though it probably should be, because I kind of want to get in some fresh new games onto this list. And it's Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley came out of left field completely. It is a indie game that is based off of Harvest Moon. I wouldn't say based off of, but it's similar to Harvest Moon in the sense that you're farming, man. It's an RPG farming simulator with very pixelated graphics, which kind of bring back some of the nostalgia from the 90s, where you have games like Final Fantasy. It kind of looks like a Final Fantasy VI, except with better pixel or better character models, and it's farming, and it looks beautiful, and it's fun to play. And like Harvest Moon, it's very addictive. That's all I have to say on Stardew Valley, and it's very cheap too. So just get Stardew Valley. Uncharted 4 is the next game on this list because Uncharted 4 almost had me cry. The only game that I've ever cried to is Red Dead Redemption. If you didn't cry at the end, even if you've played the game a couple of times, you're a monster. You have no soul. You have no human heart. And something is just simply put wrong with you. Uncharted 4 almost had me do that. It was the realization that this character probably won't have another game. Nathan Drake probably won't. There probably won't be another Uncharted game that stars Nathan Drake in it. Simply put, because he grew old. Like, he's 50 years old now. Like, he had his actual age advanced so much. Like, I don't think he's gonna do all of that crap that he was doing in his mid-30s, early 40s. Just what I think. It would be pretty cool to see him do that, but he has, his hair is like gray and he has wrinkles all over his face. He looks like he got old. And it's sad to see his character go, but it's also on a high note that the series ended. Some series they can't do that. Some series they can't say that they ended on a high note. Uncharted did. So the next couple of games aren't released yet, which is why they're kind of, it's kind of weird. And really, these two games are competing with Uncharted 4 and Stardew Valley a little bit for Game of the Year. The only problem is that they haven't been released, so I can't really properly judge them. Final Fantasy 15 and Dishonored 2. I made a video about Final Fantasy 15. I will link it right here, or somewhere here, where I was talking about how the game has some stuff to live up to. It has, the series to kind of revamp. It has some redemption after Final Fantasy XIV, because even though Final Fantasy XIV is a really great MMORPG, it did not start out that way. And Final Fantasy XIII, which a lot of people hated, a lot of critics loved, but they were wrong. So it's just something that you have to, unfortunately live with. Dishonored 2. Dishonored 2 is coming out, I think, December 4th or 5th. And I didn't know it was going to come out December 4th or December 5th. I thought that was South Park the Fractured Butthole, but it was but that game was actually delayed until the first quarter of next year. But Dishonored 2 is looking okay. It may hit at about the halfway mark on this list. It may not necessarily be the best game, but it seems like an interesting game, and because of that, I'll put it at around the Final Fantasy 15 and Uncharted 4 spot. This is gonna be it. Remember to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe for more. This has been 24. I'll be releasing a worst game of the year list. A worst games of the year list. This won't be a running. These are the worst games of the year. And 2 of them aren't even released yet. Until then,